Today we're going to look at externalities, which are really like the side effects of the market. So all economic interactions are going to have some external cost, which is just a cost that's unaccounted for in our consumer supplier model, some side effect. And they're also going to be external benefits, so things that are unaccounted for that benefit us. The way we look at these side effects are we talk about externalities, which talk about the net impact of the benefits and costs. So we have both negative externalities where the cost is higher than the benefit, and positive externalities where the benefit is higher than the cost. So a negative externality would be pollution, because the cost of remediating the pollution is greater than any benefit, right? There's not really a benefit to polluting the environment. An example of positive externality would be like higher education. So a side effect of more people having undergraduate and graduate degrees is you have a more educated workforce, right? And then we have this idea of a socially optimal point or outcome. So this is when we minimize our negative externalities and maximize our positive ones. So we're reducing the negative side effects of the market and increasing the positive side effects. The reality is our market sometimes doesn't achieve that socially optimal outcome. We're not perfect, and neither is our market. So there's this guy Coase, and his idea is that in the presence of externalities, all right, the private industry, so the companies themselves, can find an efficient solution by internalizing the externality. That means accounting for it as long as the transaction costs are low. So as long as the costs of accounting for that externality are low, the firms can fix the problem on their own. All right. So by way of example, if we're drilling for water and that pollutes the water table, the water underneath, consumers can pay more to drill safely, or the producer can pay consumers for the damages. So if the producer's making enough money, they can pay to remediate the issue, all right? As long as those costs are low enough that it doesn't impact their overall profitability, they can internalize that externality. So why don't firms always internalize the externality? Well, there are some two situations really. There's a high communication cost, so the firm has to settle with many consumers, right? And this normally takes the form of class action lawsuits. That means we've got a lot of lawyers involved and a lot of expenses for the firm. So there's a high cost for that aspect of internalizing the externality, addressing the negative effect. And then there's a high cost to negotiating and contracts for those legal agreements. So those both increase our cost of addressing the problem a firm creates. So since firms are frequently not going to address their negative externalities, we're going to be looking for an alternate solution. Right. We've got a practice problem here that you're going to do after you take the notes. Right, two of them. So how can the government address these negative externalities? So it can set environmental standards, which are laws to kind of safeguard our environment and prevent pollution. One example of that is an emissions tax. So if they tax people based on the amount of pollution they're emitting, right, if they put a cost on it, that'll reduce the emissions that firms produce because they suddenly have to pay for that. Then we have this idea of a Pigovian tax and a Pigovian subsidy. So a tax will reduce the negative externality by making it cost firms money, cut into their profits, and a subsidy where the government is giving company money to make the production cheaper will maximize the positive externality. So we can minimize the negatives by taxing and maximize the positives by subsidizing. One creative solution to the emissions problem is cap and trade. So give a company a permit to emit so much pollution, and then companies can sell their unused permits, the unused amount of pollution, to other companies that pollute more, and each year just reduce that amount that you give in permits. And by doing that, you're giving companies an opportunity to slowly change over to reducing less emissions. And then another way that these negative externalities are addressed are by technology spillover. So if one firm innovates to solve a problem, it can be adopted by the wider industry. We've got another few practice problems here, so check those out once you've finished your notes. All right. Let's dig into another type of externality. So we can have a bandwagon effect, all right, which just means if the people or firms change their behavior, it causes the norms to change and other people to change their behavior. So if one firm is suddenly being environmentally friendly and concerned about the impacts of their behavior, it can change the norms for other firms because they don't want to look bad to the consumers. And there's a network externality, all right, and this results from collaboration between individuals and firms. So an example, local government can say, well, we're going to have a recycling push. We're going to encourage people to recycle. If your neighbor is making that decision to recycle, making that effort, then they'll influence you and the people around them to also prioritize recycling. So that brings us through the notes on externalities. Go ahead and try those practice problems.